how do we internally use our own product? What are the things that we do outside of just our own product? What are the things that we automate and we build around our products? Like we use things and we do things that not the product itself doesn't always solve. We have the same problems and the same things that a lot of people probably also have and might recognize. So this is kind of like what I'm going to talk about and how we do things, how we try to build a good quality product, and how that moves forward. So myself, a little bit about myself. My name is Dirkjan Bussink. I actually live in Amsterdam, and I work on the GitHub Enterprise team. So a lot of the examples will come from my day-to-day job, where we build GitHub Enterprise, which the TLDR of what I do, I usually explain to people, is my job is to take GitHub.com and package it up in a box so that we can ship it to customers. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's the really short version of what we do. So I have to turn my clicker on. Anyway, so building Git. So how we work at GitHub. So everyone probably knows that there's been a lot of talks about like how we use GitHub to build GitHub. So one of the things, of course, we do is use GitHub a lot. So for a recent feature that we built is this case where we built pre-receive hooks for Enterprise 2.6, which is one of the things that we also do as our team. We build those kind of specific features. So that's outside of the just packaging it in a box. This is another thing we do. And one of the things is we just try to describe the feature, try to summarize discussions we have. So in this case, we were together for a meetup in real life with everyone, and we discussed about this topic because there was a lot of technical details and problems and things we had to solve to tackle this problem. But we also we don't want to keep that conversation isolated in just an in-person meeting. So it always means, we try to write up the summaries, we write up what we discussed, what we talked about, also for other people who are not there, we're not able to make it, so they can contribute and they can also be part of this discussion. So this kind of ends up, we talk about this whole thing and we try to usually work on all those things. So we don't only do that with issues, we also do that actually with pull requests. We don't use pull requests just for code. We also use it a lot for our internal documentation, our internal process, and our internal priorities. So this case, this is our future priorities. Deliberately, there's no content here because this is talking about the things we will be doing in the next 6 months, probably. But we start this discussion by opening a pull request, and somebody who has some ideas, in this case, it's Daniel, he's part of the product team. He started out with some suggestions about hey, these are some of the things we want to work on in the future on GitHub Enterprise. What does everybody else think? What are the opinions of people in the team? What do we as a team think is important? What is the external, what do our customers ask of us? And how do we combine those things into actually integrating and building those into products? So it's really important for us to keep those kind of discussions open and transparent for everyone in the company so that you can see why we're doing things, we can see what we're doing. And even, for example, we have somebody starting the team this week, and one of the things we just give them is a kind of a big reading list of, so these are the things we're working on, these are the things in recent discussions about why we're doing it. And if somebody has a question of hey, why did we do this, solve this problem in a certain way, they can always look back and see, oh, this is where the discussion was, this is how it went. We use a lot of checklists, so this is part of how we break down feature development. We just put it into often it's a big checklist of we're working on this thing first, and this is the specific parts of building this feature and this product. So this is kind of the same problem around we had with the pre-receive hooks. So it talks about these are some of the steps we need to take. We need to set up an environment in which these hooks run. We need to set up that they just don't not only run if you push code, but also if you do like a web edit and all those kind of things. So and those kind of like lists evolve and change over time. It's not like you write this list and it's like static and you never change it. It's like a continuously developing process where somebody realizes, hey, we missed this thing, or somebody starts building something and it's like, wait, this is not going the right way. We need to change this and go back to this discussion. Of course, the other thing we're very active users of chat. So in this case, like a short screenshot of something I was discussing, everybody knows about it, You see like, oh, is this a real issue? Well, it shouldn't be, but there was a bug, so it was an issue. Everyone knows those cases. But so we try to use like chat in the cases where you want to talk a little bit more synchronously with people. So you want to do a little bit quicker, get quicker feedback, and talk to people about something that it's a one-line thing you want to ask, and you don't feel like it's always worth putting it into issue. But we still kind of like cross-reference those things. So if sometimes you start something with a really small question and something that seems really innocent, but you end up talking about the problem and discussing it way deeper than you originally anticipated. So what we do is like we take those links to those discussions, maybe summarize them in an issue or a pull request, and add a reference to like, hey, this is where people can read our discussion. This is where people can read about how we did things. And especially like on our team, it's really important to make those things transparent. So the team I'm on is we don't have anybody who lives in the same city as anybody else on the team. So we're mostly based in Europe and the US, but it means like whenever somebody's working, there's always like a good chance that half of the team is asleep, that they're not around, and you cannot do like a really quick question with them. So like people read the chat backlogs, might actually comment on a chat discussion like 5 hours later when they wake up, because they have like a new point of feedback or a new insight into this problem that some other colleagues were discussing later. And that's like fine, it's like that's something we try to encourage, and that's something we try to be able to embrace, that that's the very nature of asynchronous communication, and that's the very nature of how those things work. Other things we do with chat and tooling around that and automation is we do a lot of things with operations in chat. So in this case, this is a graph of, I think, last week of the number of deploys that happened on GitHub.com. So you can see it's around 400 deploys to the website in a week, which is fairly common. It's a pretty normal week. You can see there's a slight difference between like the weekends where it's flatter than the weekdays, because, well, we don't want to encourage people too much to work on the weekends, because you also need the time for yourself and time to take off. So this is the thing is available. I can deploy, so I can actually, this is like I did a bug fix, and I deployed it to production and was able to merge the issue. So this is also something that's like a very day-to-day workflow. This is the kind of thing that you do every day. You try to automate and you try to improve. And I think that's, for us, that's a really important part of all these things that I'm talking about today, is like, how do you make this process for yourself easier, and how do you make this smoother and happen every day and make it a part of your day-to-day routine, instead of making deploying or updating or changing your website a really intensive and heavy process. This is another example, more specific to our internal process for Enterprise. So I don't know if everybody saw Image Tragic last week. This is about this case. So with GitHub Enterprise, we have multiple versions that we support for our customers. Like, not everyone wants to always upgrade to the last feature release. So it means in this case we support, like, we have the last version is 2.6 that we release, but we still support 2.5 and up until 2.2 with security fixes and critical updates. So in this case, Image Tragic could lead to remote code execution. So it was fairly critical that we actually release a bug fix and a security fix for all our supported versions. So in this case, what we do is we deploy we write a fix. We always merge it and continuously integrate on master. So we try to, like, master is always green. Master is always something that we can deploy a test instance with Enterprise. But we also keep these branches for longer running and maintained versions. So in this case, what we do, we have built tooling around automating that process for us. Like we don't want to do busy work manually having to backport fixes that we do. So we want to, so we automated it. So we have a script that actually runs in chat. It runs in chat and then just does it all the work for you. And the other thing is, what we do is we do video chats. Since, like I already mentioned, we're all in different places around the world, and we always try to be very conservative with the usage of this. It's for one-on-ones, so I'm the manager of the team, so I talk with everybody personally, one-on-one every week to see hey, how's it going? Are there any problems? Can I help with something? And those kind of discussions around their personal development and all those things. And that's very useful to actually be able to see a face and to talk to a person. We do a weekly team meeting, but that's not obligatory. So if somebody can't make it, if somebody's traveling, or somebody's oh, it's super early for me, I don't want to be there every week, that's totally fine. It's we use it for some high bandwidth discussions, but also as a social mechanism. Since we work all together, it's good to kind of see faces every week. Even though it's not really about the content of the meeting, it's just nice to hang out a little bit virtually and to talk to people. And the last thing is what we do is we try to meet up in real life at least twice a year with everybody to socialize. And I think that's a very important part of if you're a company that, for GitHub, we really embrace the culture of being able to work remotely, to be able to work wherever you are. I think for me personally, and I think for the companies, a big value of that is that you're able to work with some of the best people all over the world, and you're not constrained to only having people in Silicon Valley or only in Amsterdam or wherever you are as a company, but that you're able to get people from everywhere. And I think as part of the company, you have to accept that part of that also means that those people want to meet up with each other, they want to bond socially, because it's a lot easier to communicate with somebody virtually and in chat and all those things if you actually know somebody, and it's oh, this is the way they communicate, this is their style of talking, oh, this is the way they make jokes, and all those things are always very good to know. Also in the virtual conversation, because it prevents a lot of potential misunderstandings, or hey, why did you say that way? It's oh yeah, that's their style of communication, especially if you're with a group of people for whom English is not their first language. So you always, it can be not a thing, maybe they use an expression that's not familiar for other people on the team and all those things. So it's really important to also do that, embrace that. So that's all good, and everybody, and it's kind of interesting, when I talk about these things, people ask me oh, how's it to work for GitHub with people everywhere around the thing? And the first thing really people often always ask about is so what do you use? It's oh, you use GitHub, but oh, what do you use for chat? Or what do you use for video? It's well, it's a useful question, but it's not really the point. So it's really more about the process that you build and the process that those tools support. You can use Google Hangouts, you can use we use a tool called Blue Jeans, or there's a lot of video conferencing tools. And yes, some of them are better than others, and some of them have very specific annoyances, but you can work, if you have a good process, you can work with almost all of those tools. That's not really the part. It's more about deliberately thinking of how do we want to work together, and how do we want to make sure that we're able to be a productive and happy, good team together. It's I think Chris mentioned in the keynote, it's really about we want to design the way we work together as a way that makes the people that work, make the people happy to do the work and not be frustrated because, I have yet another video meeting at 9 p.m. That's for me personally, that's really I just get annoyed by those things, and people know that. And it's I always try to limit those because they're a lot more invasive and interrupting than, somebody asking you or pinging you a question at 9 p.m., which maybe sometimes feels the same, but you're oh, I'm just hanging on the couch and I can just answer them, even though it's, oh, I need to set up a video meeting, oh, I have to go into my room and set up my microphone and my headphone and all that kind of stuff. So it's really, I think, really important that, to be conscious about those things. And I think for us in our organization, it really forces us to do that. And I think if you if you work as a person or in a company where you do have people who work remotely, it's really important that everybody embraces that remote workflow, not just the person if there's only one person outside the team while the rest is in the same office. So that's really when it kind of breaks down if you have it set up like that. All right. So the other thing I think I already mentioned a few times that we do a lot around making our own life better is automating those processes. So we have a lot of things where, it's like, this is something that's manual labor. This is something that, somebody does every week. Why do we do that? Can we automate that? Can we make that easier? So of course, continuous delivery is kind of like the standard example that everyone kind of knows about. And I really believe that if you as a company are not doing something like this right now, that working on that in your process is probably the thing that will give you one of the biggest potential benefits of improving your workflow and improving the way that you can work as a company. If you are able to ship a bug fix, if you're able to deploy a change or add a feature in like a matter of hours instead of having to do that and do a release three months later, I think that's like super important. And it's kind of interesting because like I work on the enterprise product, so we have like we do feature releases every 3 months. It's kind of like, wait, that's not continuous delivery. But what we do is like our build, like we make sure that our builds are always green. We can deploy a test instance with the current code as it is right now at every moment in time. So it's always trying to make sure that the system works, the system is integrated, and the system is healthy. So really important for that is making sure that it happens every time. So continuous iteration, like always run CI, always be fast. And the big part of that is like make sure you have that fast feedback. So if your build takes like, I'm gonna ask like a question like who here works on a software project where your build takes more than 10 minutes? There's a few hands. Who's doing it in like 2 minutes or less? That's pretty good. I think like that's the kind of like goal you want to aim for. If you're working on a project where your CI build takes like 40 minutes or like an hour, fixing that and moving that down is probably going to give you a really big benefit in how fast you're able to iterate and how fast you're able to deploy and do things. And one of the things that people don't realize is that, for example, this is like an enterprise build, which is it's actually one of the slower builds we have within GitHub. So we're talking about a few minutes here. What it does, it actually builds an entire GitHub Enterprise product and runs a set of integration tests against it. So it does the whole process building, like gathering all the components that are part of the problem and building them and run CI on them. So we do a lot of things to make that fast. It's like we cache aggressively. So because it's a build process, like any intermediate artifact that you can cache it, so next time you build, it's faster, because not everything changes on every commit, so you don't have to rebuild the world every time. Paralyze it, like that's the thing like I see very few people do in real life, is if you paralyze your build, you can just farm it out to multiple, like even just paralyze it on a single machine or paralyze it across a lot of servers, really helps a lot. Like if you, for example, if we're talking about the build that actually runs GitHub.com, the website, so that CI build usually takes, I think, between 1 and 2 minutes. But if you would run it like serially on your local laptop, it would take like maybe an hour or longer. But we just farm it out to like 60 build machines, run it in parallel, so you can get really fast feedback on that process, because that's really, for us, super important to be able to ship things, because otherwise we wouldn't do those 400 deploys a day. We would do like 10 deploys a day, and that really both makes you slower, but it also increases your risk, because if you're only able to do 10 deploys a day, it means that you start to batch up bigger features and more changes into the same commits. So it means that you're actually exposing your risk and improving, like raising your risk, because you're starting to make bigger changes. And one of the biggest factors for how many issues you have is like how big are the changes that you're deploying. The smaller you can make them, the better it will be, and the more safer it will be to deploy. But there's of course more than CI. There's not only CI, which is part of what you should automate and what you can improve on. So this is the same example I mentioned earlier, the chat automation. This is an example of like what we automate. Like deploy should be easy. It should be like deploying your or updating your product or releasing your product. Ideally, should be like one line to do that. And part of what we do is like it also in chat is to create like this collaborative environment. So it's not just like a technical aspect that should be one line. It's also the social aspect of everyone on the team knows that you're doing this. Like I don't have to ask somebody on my team, like, oh, like last week I was on vacation while Image Tragic happened. And so if we go back to this thing, so I was not involved in the process, but when I came actually back from vacation, I could pull up these graphs, like I could pull up these logs. Like I could see when in this case Daniel did this part of the process. So actually, like, it makes it really easy for me to, talk to people and be like, hey, if there was any problems, anything I can help with or anything I can improve on for next time. Like, did anybody hit any problems? Because I can just look at what was happening and see if people were struggling with something or anything like that. So it really makes it like a shared like command line environment that everybody's working in that allows you to collaborate together and see what everybody's doing. And then a little bit of like how do we do those things? So in this case, the command you just saw, this is like a small snippet of the code. So actually what we do is we have in this case a list of supported versions. Actually 2.1 is out of support now, so it's a little bit older. But what we do is we go through all those and we check like so each time we merge a pull request and it needs to be backported for GitHub Enterprise, we just add a label on this project which is part of GitHub Enterprise. So what we do is we just look for, which are all the merge pull requests with this label. We go through each project as part of GitHub Enterprise, which is like contained in another script, which lists like, hey, there's like GitHub, which is like GitHub.com, the Rails application. We have like a service that handles Git traffic, and we have like a whole bunch of other things that are integrated. And we just loop through all these and search for them and generate a pull request with the API that does the backport process. So when originally we started this, Enterprise, this was kind of like a manual process that people had to do, which was really not very interesting work. It was very error prone because it's easy to make a mistake. So this is something we really early on started to automate because we don't want to be busy. This is busy work we don't want to do things about. The same for like releasing GitHub Enterprise. There's like a single command like, I want to publish 261, which was last week. And it just reports, and after a while, it comes back after a few minutes like, hey, I've done this. I've created all the AMIs in AWS. I truncated a bit. There's a few more AMIs, and there's like links to images for like VMware and all those other kind of supported platforms. So this is also something like we don't want to have somebody manually trying to run a script locally on their laptop, which depends on their local environment. Their artifacts might be slightly different. So we just want to have like a streamlined process and tool chain that does this all for you. And this way, again, I could see, Sergio in this case did the release, built the images, and that all went fine. It was all good. So I was happy that everyone, it was all super smooth and nothing really problematic happened. So the question is like, how do we automate this kind of things? And so in this case, like you saw the example, we use the API, like the GitHub API ourselves internally very heavily for all kinds of automation. So this is just one example. We do automation about like, for example, we have teams that have scripts that say, I want to see every team mention for my team on different issues and pull requests within the company. because people ask for replies from my team. So they have a script in chat that basically says sup, and then my team name, and says like, oh, this is all the things people asked your team about. Because like I don't think everything that all the things I just talked about, like you could say like, oh, these are all features that are missing from GitHub, which sometimes is, sometimes isn't, because not everything that you saw there should be a feature. Like we have a lot of internal processes that we don't think are very specific to us. It's like not every company does it that way, and does adding all these features to the product make it actually worse, because there's a lot of features that a lot of people won't use and will be in the way for their workflow. So I just want to like encourage people to say like, if you feel like, hey, GitHub, the product, is not solving this part of the problem, is like, yeah, look at like other integrations, look at the ways you can work and automate your own process around it, because like we really want to enable like our platform and integrations to be able to do all those things for you, because like we're not going to solve everyone's problem always. Like that's not our goal. We just want to have like a super strong and really good core of features that are valuable to everyone. Like we want to solve the 80% for people, and if you have like important parts of your 20% you want to automate, we want to give you and allow you the flexibility to do that on top of our product. So sometimes it should. And there have been, like historically there have been features, like it's not just, like Chris talked a little bit about the Dear GitHub letter, but there's also a bunch of features that came, for example, out of some of the things about what we do with GitHub Enterprise. Because GitHub Enterprise actually is one of the products that has a lot of things like different requirements and a different workflow than a lot of our other products. Like if you look at github.com, the website, it's very much you write a branch, you push it up, you deploy it, and you merge it. Like there's no process around, oh, I need to like backport this to other releases. Oh, I need to like build release artifacts and images, and all those steps are not part of that process. So it's very different in some ways. So sometimes it drives other changes. So historically, originally, I don't know if people remember this, but before GitHub usually only had, like you only saw the last status check. So one of the things like internally, like I don't think we could have built GitHub Enterprise, the product, without actually having this feature, because we need like a lot of different environments. We have CI builds that say, oh, I want to test this works on VMware, I want to test this works on AWS, I want to test this works on Hyper-V, I want to test this works with these kind of settings, I want to test this works with these kind of settings. So we have all these different modes and all these different ways, or like, I want to test authentication with SAML, I want to test authentication with LDAP, like all these different aspects and modes of the system that, if we want to add that all into one big, huge test suite, it would take hours. No, we want to be able to like have independent test suites that test those independent paths and do those all in parallel. So I don't think like we couldn't have built the product without a feature like this. So like there was a lot of internal drive of like building these kind of features because we were starting to work and improve the processes around GitHub Enterprise. And the other thing is like loose protected branches, which is a recent thing. Shout out to TMA, I think he's maybe in the room for working on this. Because we, as Enterprise, like so this is really, I don't know if people know the details about this feature, but it means that with protected branches, before you merge, it used to be the case that your branch always had to be up to date with master, because there could be a change in master that would actually break your build if you had an outdated base in your own pull request. But it turns out that that is a risk that's much more of a real risk in the case like where the model follows the way that we deploy and build GitHub.com, where we always want to make sure that we run against master, and we always want to make sure the code is up to date, because we want to push that into production immediately. For GitHub Enterprise, it was very much less of a concern, because we work very much on independent features that really don't touch each other. And it turned out that it wasn't really a big problem that, if I just merge my pull request and a coworker wants to merge his pull request, that those are independent, that we could just merge them together, and we didn't have to update one or the other based on which person was first merging this pull request. So this is also something like, whenever there was a question like, hey, who wants to test this internally before we release it? I was like, yes, please, like this is the reason I'm not using this feature. Can I please get this feature flag on immediately? So we also try to like improve those things internally. So the thing also like that really also like it kind of shows like it's really important to experiment with your development process. Like try new things. If you have a thing that always takes a lot of time to do, like automate it, test if that works, test if it improves, and maybe sometimes like your automation actually encourage you to take new steps and see new things that you can actually improve your process on. Or maybe you try to automate something and it's like, wait, this is really makes it painful to automate. So is that something that's good to automate, or maybe you should change the whole process in the first place? We've seen like there's a lot of things we changed around the process, like one example was we did like the weekly team meeting, and we did a bunch of like status updates in that meeting, and it turned out it didn't really work well for us because like it's not super useful to listen to everybody talk about what they did and what they're doing next week. Like that would take up like half the meeting, and it could have been just done as well in just an issue and just right up there, you know, it's like this is what I was working on, these are the things I need help with. There was no reason to do that synchronously in a video chat. So like experiment, optimize those things, and don't be afraid to like question your process and be like, hey, we're always doing this way, but why are we doing that? Can't we just, you know, change that? So to summarize, too long didn't listen. Like I hope, well, you can read the slides, but there was also some listening involved. So really, you know, focus on your process, not on your tools. Think of what you need in your process and see which tools kind of like meet most of those goals. Tools support your process, like they're not a goal in itself. Automate it where possible. So if you can do something that takes you manual work, just make it automatic. Fast feedback, so make sure that each step in your process gives you fast feedback. Like don't have something that, you know, if you do something, you have to wait for half an hour for something to happen. Like we're not always as good about those things ourselves as well. Like we always have those things, and we really try to make work on them and improve them where we have them. Share your process automation, so make sure that other people see the automation you're doing. So in our case, we use chat-ups a lot for that aspect, where it's like everybody can see what everybody else is doing. You can teach people the process and the automation by just showing them. So if somebody asks like, hey, how does this work? You can just like, you type it in and they see the feedback and they see how it works. And keep iterating. So always keep iterating, always be improving, and make sure your process gets better and better over time. So that's it.